In 1 year, I lived in Seattle, got fired from my job, got a new job, quit that job, left Seattle, went to France, met my first boyfriend, got beat up during May Day.
Okay, thank you for coming out. And I think we're going to get into it, but let me just say that if you haven't read Prince Shakur's memoir, you should read it right away. Literally every single paragraph grabs you, holds you, and takes you on this really amazing journey. Um, Prince mentions in the acknowledgments that some people think that young black people don't have stories to tell about their lives. But once you read this memoir, you're going to see that young black people have stories to tell about their lives that are truly gripping, really important, politically insightful, and deeply resonant. Um, I just loved every page of this book, and I don't say that lightly. Um,
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Um, I thought that we should begin in an easy place, which is the place of you begin writing at 12, but you know well before 12 that you want to be a writer. Tell us how you come into that.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. I mean, I was kind of talking about this earlier today because I was talking to a class of high schoolers, but I think being a shy kid, books were my escape, stories were my escape. And a part of that is like growing up in the hood, having a protective mother, don't go outside, don't play with the kids in the neighborhood. Where do you turn to? It's books, it's Goosebumps, it's Nancy Drew. And so I think books from an early age really fed like a deep curiosity in me. And I mean, easily, still my favorite movie to date is Titanic, and that's because my aunt had a VHS of it. And I remember every time I'd go to her house, I would go to her room, watch the movie, or watch as much of it as I could. And even that to me is like, I mean, I was like, I don't even know how old I was, maybe like 4 when that movie came out. And so the fact that a story like that could reach me so much, and even when I watch it now, I look at the themes and the things in it, and so much of that has kind of guided me through my life. But yeah, when I was 12, I had a teacher assign everyone in our class to write a short story, and I don't know, there's no other way to describe it than I wrote that short story and I kind of just fell in love with the process. And I don't know, there was no way that I wrote that and I wouldn't have kept writing. Like it just kind of unlocked something in me because when you grow up loving stories and books so much and you revere and admire these writers and you realize, oh, there's some part of me that could do the same thing. And yeah, it might take a lot of practice, but I view like those first years of me writing as just me really loving something so much that I didn't need to be good at it. I just kind of found joy in the way that it gave me adventure, the way that it allowed me to escape some of the things at home that I wasn't really satisfied with. And so, I don't know. I mean, and I say this to people. I'm like, writing is my first love, and it really is. Like, it's something that I would never dare give up on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you have a tremendous presence of self um, as a writer, as a young person, and as one reads the memoir, one sees that you have that even before you begin to write. Um, the encounters with your mom. Um, so you're a shy child, but you're not a withdrawn child. You're willing to hold some ground and
Yeah,
to,
yeah. I
and
guess
to
it's a,
stake out some space. We'll come to that a little bit around the question of sexuality. But I'm wondering, the other thing that's really this memoir is in some ways a hard memoir. It's written through death. It's written taking death seriously as a way to live a life. And I wonder if you might say something to us about what it meant for you. Like 2014, Michael Brown is on the first or second page of this book. and then death haunts the entire book from page 2 till the end. I want to talk about what it has meant for you to live through and write through death.
I think that's a good question. I think a lot of it is knowing when I was young that my father died. Wait, is there like a ring?
Yeah,
people
I can-
hear? Wonder what that is.
Yeah,
Okay. What could that be? Okay.
it's gone now.
Okay.
No.
Oh, what is that? Can anyone guess what it is? Okay, I'll just keep going. I think being very young and knowing from a very early age that my father was murdered and a lot of people in my family wouldn't talk about it, it naturally gave me a curiosity about death. When other people feel really reluctant to speak about something, I'm usually the kind of person like, what are you trying to hide? And so I think just having that hang over you from a very young age, having this deep sense of longing, having all these questions, it taught me that, yes, death is something that's scary, but I've always been curious about it in some way, how death, based on who the person was in their life, how death can totally erase their memory from most of the people that knew them. It makes people reluctant to talk about them. And so that was just like a very real thing. And then I think getting older and coming of age and figuring out that I was queer and dealing with homophobia and kind of contending with what might happen to me when I came out. And in the original draft of this book, the first chapter was the chapter where I return home from a field trip my second year of high school, and it's basically the same day as when I came out to my mother, or she found out that I was gay. And I wanted to situate the book there because I get back to my high school parking lot after this amazing day at this amusement park. It's like a very weird day, but I had all this fun at this amusement park. But earlier that day in the early hours of the morning, my mother woke me up in the middle of the night and asked, "Are you gay?" I said yes. She'd gone through my room and had read my journal. And this entire day where I was out and having fun with my friends and confiding in them and thinking about what might happen next, I'd already faced the reality that if I come out, my parents might kick me out, I might get the shit beat out of me, I don't know, it's like your mind, like, I think when you know that you have a secret that people won't accept or they don't want, some part of me had to be prepared for the worst possible situation. And so in those scenes that I wrote where I'm going to that parking lot and it's dark, and I mean, I kind of give nods to it in the chapter, but I was ready for like a van to pull up and for me to have to run. So it's just like, to me, coming of age meant that I had to be prepared to die to be who I really was. And it's really that real for queer people, for trans people from all different kinds of backgrounds. And the fact that I had to deal with that when I was 14, 15, it makes death something that, yes, is scary and traumatic, but it's also just literally a fact of life that I look around and see around me every day. If we look at the violence that America produces and capitalism and white supremacy, it's like it's baked into everything that's around us. And so to come of age through that, I think is something that I commend my younger self for being able to do. But if I look at every phase of me coming into who I am, there had to be some kind of confrontation with death. There had to be some kind of confrontation with, if I don't make the right choice in terms of what this institution says or my family's cultural identity, some shit can go down and it can end badly for me. And I think that risk is where you really begin to live life. And so working through it and embedding it in the book and kind of honoring that is a process that I feel really proud of. And I feel like it's deeply tied to how I view myself as like a queer person, a political person, because in order to like really liberate ourselves as Black people, death is like an inherent part of the equation. Like you can't be Black and fight for your liberation and not expect some kind of harm to come your way. And I don't mean that like you should always expect things to go wrong, but it's just kind of part of the reality of the history that I've seen my people live through. And so to write about that, it just made sense because I mean, it's kind of in the book, but I think when you don't confront something or reckon with it, it has power over you, whether or not you know it. And so I think writing about those things, confronting those things, I mean, it's kind of with me every single day. And when I started writing this book or when I started having the idea for this book in 2016, it was because I had, in 1 year, I lived in Seattle, got fired from my job, got a new job, quit that job, left Seattle, went to France, met my first boyfriend, got beat up during May Day at protests, went to Montana. People were arguing with me at bars about Rachel Dolezal. I had all these racist coworkers. I was getting into cars with people that were drunk and drunk driving. I left that job. I went back to Ohio, got another job. Get out to vote job during the 2016 election. It's like, that wasn't easy. Quit that, went to Standing Rock, saw a bunch of police violence, had a friend get arrested. I got arrested. And then like a month later, I went to the Philippines. And so it's kind of like when I look at that year and how many different choices I make and how many different ways I had to pivot, I was constantly negotiating this space where I'm questioning, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? And I think when you're Black and queer, or you're of these combination of identities where there's so many systems that can attack you, like not being safe, it's like in one moment, it could be done for you. And so a part of that is built into a lot of the emotion that I have in the book, but I think when you honor the power that death has in your life, it also gives you the capacity to be closer to life, to be more present, to honor the things that really matter. And I also say that as like in the past year, I've lost like different friends, and like I had a family member pass away last year. And in my grieving process, I've realized like grief is ugly, it's messy, but it also is really teaching me a lot about how to not waste time, or how to just look up and look at the wind moving through the trees, and to realize like, this is a moment of meditation, this is a moment of peace, and grief has brought me here.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was saying to you earlier, that there's a lot of death in this book, but the death is not the kind of death that leaves you immobilized. And if you can say there's something wonderful about death, is that the death gives us you. At the end of all of it, we have you, and you're a fantastic person. I have more questions about death, but I actually wondered, because of how you answered that, 2016 was a big year for you. And this book is written also through your travels. And so there are lots of journeys here. There's the journey and yourself emerging as a writer, and we get this gift at the end of it. But there are all of these journeys that you take across the US, Europe, Asia. What produced that desire in you to go backpacking on your own with very little money to those particular spaces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up going to Jamaica as a kid. Like, it's in the book, but I went to kindergarten there. Every other summer, I pretty much went to Jamaica. And so I think from a very young age, I saw family, the local kind of life there, but I had an aunt that worked at a resort. So, I mean, I would always be going to the bars, and I'd say, give me a virgin strawberry daiquiri. And the bartenders loved me. And so I think from a very young age, I loved the duality of what going to Jamaica offered me, and I think it taught me from a very young age about privilege, and so some of that is built into the way I travel and the way I write about travel. And then in college, I really got into On the Road and Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. And I mean, in my freelance writing career, I've kind of unpacked some of the issues with being Black, and then being into beatnik literature and realizing, oh, a lot of this is racist. And so, I mean, honestly, when I started traveling a lot in college, it was, I want to be like on the road, I want to hitchhike. And so that's why I went to Yellowstone. And then Yellowstone, I met people there that helped me get seasonal work in Montana. But also in college, and I'm still friends with him, but he's in the book a lot. My friend Eli, he also grew up traveling, but it was to Central America and South America. And so we just became really good friends. And my senior year, I invited myself to go with him and his mom to Costa Rica during winter break. And that was kind of a new experience, being in a country where I didn't know the language, just navigating how weird that was. That was shortly after my best friend's mother passed away, so I was also kind of grieving in this weird emotional space. And then I think being radicalized my senior year and organizing around Michael Brown and kind of learning these politics as I was kind of entering like adulthood outside of academia, it really just gave me this kind of desire to make a real choice about the kind of adult I wanted to be. And so, I mean, in the first summer that I worked in Montana, there was a guy from Yellowstone, Colt. I don't know if I mentioned this in the book, but Colt and I basically we had
Yes, you do.
Really, we had a messy. I don't know. It was, you have to read the book because I don't want to explain it all right now. But we had a messy connection, and I don't know if I wrote about this aspect of it in the book. But when I was working in Montana my first summer, he would call me all the time and be really drunk and try to have pillow talk with me. And we would always talk about, like, we're gonna travel together and work seasonally. I thought I was gonna get a boyfriend. I mean, it didn't happen. But so I just mentioned that because at every point of major transition in my life, travel has always been a way for me to cross that threshold. When I graduated, it was working in Montana. When I left Seattle, it was going to France. And I think when I went to France, that was kind of a shift in why I was traveling, because before that, it was like, I want to be a beatnik, I want to hitchhike, I want to travel around like these white people in these books do. And when I went to France, it was because of James Baldwin, and because I was reading about him, and because I admired what his journey represented. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, the travel bug bit me, and I am an anarchist, and I don't like doing things in really lofty and luxurious ways necessarily. So a lot of it was just like, I think the ways that I started to travel just kind of gave me these moments of awe that I keep trying to find again, that I keep searching for in whatever places I go to. And in Costa Rica, that was spending New Year's Eve there and not knowing Spanish and hanging out with people in the public plaza. And in the Philippines, it was riding around on the back of motorbikes or singing karaoke with cops who had just gotten off their shift and were hanging out at this bar in Ifugao province. Or in France, like falling in love, but also going to the countryside and just seeing parts of places that I don't think that the traditional tourist would see, and feeling humbled by that and wanting to know the world in a way that feels more complex. And I think I travel in that way because some part of me wishes that people would go to Jamaica and view Jamaica in that way. There's been so many times where I've traveled and I talk to people about traveling and talk about Jamaica, and I don't know, it's like I feel such an anger sometimes that people get to go there and just experience tourism, when I'm like, there's so much here that people don't even want to have access to, or maybe people shouldn't, because that's how people mess things up when they're coming from another place. And so, I don't know, I think as I've grown and developed as a person, my relationship to travel has grown and developed, but I always try to have it be based in some kind of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, one way that I experienced reading your memoir and experiencing your travels along with you was as you travel through and towards your sexuality. You know, what happens in France is slightly different from what happens in the Philippines and what happens in Yellowstone and so in Montana and so on. And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that and the kinds of estrangements between claiming your sexual identity and then entering into sexual practice. What that evoked for you, what you were struggling with, what you were trying to come to terms with.
Yeah, I mean, I think also a part of the book that's interesting is that when I originally wrote it, it was in chronological order. And then when I sold it to Tin House and I was working with my editor, Hanif Abdurraqib, he immediately was like, I love this book. There are some parts of it we want to like polish or revise. But the biggest thing I want to look at is how we can rearrange this out of order and break it into sort of sections that represent these mini memoirs. And so when I look at the book now as it is, rearranging these things, it changes the way you experience the story, but it also shows that some of the central themes and issues that I'm dealing with have kind of followed me my entire life. In some ways, some of the issues that I'm dealing with precede me, they have existed before me. And so in terms of like navigating coming into myself as a queer person and then how sex is involved in that, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to when I was a teenager and my mother found out that I was gay, and she reacted really horribly, and we had all these really horrible talks where she was just relying on all these tropes and all these ignorant ideas about gay people. And I remember a lot of that was like her saying like, you've probably already slept with people and someone messed with you when you were younger, and I know you're doing all these things and I can have you checked by a doctor. And in a way, it's a realization I had then. I was just like, just because I'm gay, it doesn't mean that I'm sleeping around all the time. Like, that isn't the immediate expression of my sexuality. And when I look back at being a teenager and not having like the same experiences around sex and coming of age in high school as other people, I found my community and I navigated my identity online through websites like Trevor Space, through movies, through porn. And a lot of that was like me understanding within myself what these things meant to me first. And then I think when I got to college, a lot of my first sexual experiences were based in like, I haven't experienced this yet, so I need to experience it now. And then eventually I kind of slowed down and I realized like, it's not as cut and dry as I'd like for it to be. Like, I went to college at a PWI. I was going to parties.
People in Toronto might not.
Sorry. Predominantly white institution, so mostly white school. And so going there and being black and queer and being like, I'm gonna turn up, I'm gonna do all these things. It's like, I didn't meet a lot of people that I wanted to date, let alone sleep with. And so, especially then leaving college, and I mean, that's a lot of what the Philippines chapter is about. It's about me coming to terms with the ways that I've tried to project a certain kind of sense of sexuality to other people because I was ashamed that I didn't have enough experience, and then kind of accepting that that lack of experience doesn't mean I'm worth any less, or I should take less. And so I think coming into my queerness without so much of those intense sexual undertones, it just kind of taught me to kind of understand why I desire things in the way that I do, because I think sometimes when queer people enter like sexual spaces or nightlife spaces, we can be conditioned in desirability politics and wanting to be desired by other people. And if I look back at how I wrote about things in the book and how I experienced them as like the subject, like I had to get to a point where I realized the point of sex isn't for me to achieve being desired. It's for me to own and navigate and honor the things that I desire and to give language to that and to find power in that. And that's still a process that I'm going through. Like, it's scary. I mean, I moved to New York to kind of hoe around, and I mean, it's sort of happening. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's my answer, but it's just like, and even when I talk to friends now that maybe have seen themselves as straight most of their lives, and then they kind of are beginning to navigate or understand their queerness, like what I tell a lot of people is like, you can give it time. And to me, queer or gay culture isn't just about sex. It's about these histories that we have. It's about these struggles that we've gone through. It's about these shared cultural practices. And it's not necessarily just about penetration or sex or whatever. It's about community. It's about how we've survived the thousands of things that we've survived and people before us have. And I think understanding and navigating that has given me, I don't know, just more of a love for like my queerness outside of sex. Yeah.
If Jimmy Baldwin and SSM Hill could have a kid, it'll be you. But let's talk about the complicated, contradictory figure called the Black Mother. um, because in the book, you have a really interesting relationship with your mom. It's full of tension, full of heartbreak, anger, but yet you never really reject her. You don't cut her out of your life. You might not talk to her for a period of time, but you don't cut her out of your life. And by the time we conclude reading the memoir, she's not there. She's not present in the way that she is in the beginning, but one doesn't feel like she's been cut loose. And I'm wondering if you can, first, has she read it? And, and secondly, what's the nature of the relationship? How are you thinking about, this contradictory figure of the Black mother, especially I think for queer Black boys?
Yeah.
Who can both be loved by the women in their lives and also simultaneously be seen as a kind of betrayal of Black manhood.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, because I think it's the first time anyone's asked me that in that way. There's a lot of different answers jumping around in my head. But I guess to one of the questions, has she read it? No. No. And then to the other questions, I mean, there were a lot of things I wanted to juggle and try to do right in this book. And some of it was when I was writing the earlier sections, like the childhood sections, I felt guilty because when I was looking back at my childhood, like, yes, I have happy memories of my mother and me helping her cook in the kitchen and hanging out at her hair salon and going on road trips with her and my stepdad to Florida. But a lot of what I felt that I haven't really talked about was guilt that it didn't make sense to write about those things, or I don't know, it's like the things that I remembered more vividly were the ways that I started to see my mother as a human being as I got older. And a lot of that is when I was younger, my mother would always say to me, "You're the child that taught me how to be affectionate. You taught me how to be more loving." And that was because compared to my brother, like I was always hugging her and kissing her and on her. And like, she always talks about how when I was really little, like preschool age, like when she'd be like, "No, you can't sleep in my bed with me," I would put my blanket in front of her bedroom door and just sleep in front of her room on the floor. And as I got older and as I started getting into my queerness and understanding my queerness, and I was getting out of my self-hatred, I felt a lot of anger towards my parents, because the most honest part of me when I was like 12, 13 is I thought, I hate you for making you, for the fact that you made me hate myself. And I've never been able to find a way to talk to my parents about that. I don't think I ever will, but I think contending with that forced me to look at some of those little signals my mother sent me as a kid, which was like, how can you tell a child that they taught you how to love? It's like, it teaches them that they're responsible for softening you. And as I got older, I realized, like, you've made me hard in some ways, and the story that you're telling yourself is that I've helped you become softer. And I think this is a myth that you're telling yourself, and it made me so angry. It made me so angry, and I don't think there's ever been a place in our relationship that I've been able to talk about that. But then I came out, my mother found out I was gay. I eventually came out to my stepdad right before I went to college. And I think what coming out really taught me is that sometimes parents have kids and they tell themselves these stories about their children so much that when the truth actually arrives, they can't even deal with the reality of what their child is. And the question I kept asking myself, and I think it's in the first chapter where I'm talking to a therapist I had in high school, but the question was, why make something that you won't even try to understand? And so in a lot of writing this book, I wanted to kind of navigate what I kind of call reluctant parenthood, like what happens when parents kind of resent their children in some way. And some of that came through when I was a teenager, and it's in the book, but I mean, there was one situation where, like, my mother thought there was a burglar in our house when I was like 15, and I woke up, I knew there wasn't a burglar. I mean, maybe there could have been, but I was just like, girl, what are you talking about? And I very much, like, visibly had an attitude, but I still went downstairs to check, and I'm like, if anyone's gonna fight this burglar, it's gonna be me at 14, 15. But basically, I checked downstairs, there was no one there. My mother was really upset that I was angry, and she punched me in the face in her kitchen. And she said, she punched me, and then I pushed her away, and she said, "You're gonna beat women just like your father did. And I hope they do to you what people probably did to him in jail." And my mother has never apologized for this. There's been numerous times throughout my childhood where she said horrible things just as horrible as that. And to have a relationship with someone that claims that you taught them how to be soft, but they still can spit that at you, and it's completely justified to them. And so I think from a very early age, I realized my mother is living through the memory of my father through me sometimes. And it's in some clues of the way that she talks about me. It's like when I was really little and I was sick as an infant and I was in the NICU, my mother said sometimes she couldn't look at me in the NICU bed because it reminded her of looking at my father in his casket. And it's in the book as well, but I mean, I had an aunt after my father died who said to my mother, and my mother said this to me growing up, she said about my father dying, she said, "Some people have to die so that others can live." And so in my relationship with my mother, I've learned about patriarchal violence, I've learned about abuse, I've learned about softness, I've learned about how men can try to help the women around them, but I've also learned how when you're queer and a woman in your life reinforces or represents or is working through the patriarchy, sometimes you have to negotiate what your relationship with that woman is in order to have a deeper relationship with yourself. And it's all throughout the book, but I think like what you noticed is like by the end, like I never wanted to villainize my mother in any way because in a lot of ways, I think growing up with her and having my stepdad and then he went to prison, even though my mother's reaction was horrible after I came out, my father's reaction was much worse to me in a way because I thought he was the softer parent. I thought he was more understanding. And there's other things that have happened since the end of the book that I wish I could write about, but I think what I tell myself with my mother is that she stayed and my stepdad didn't. And some of that is he couldn't, he was deported, but even in his reaction to me, like I don't know, I think it's something about the physical proximity that I have to my mother compared to my stepdad, but some part of me, even with the pain, I just have to honor like she stayed, she raised me and my brother through me being in high school, single, dealing with having a partner in jail. And even though I can see her mistakes, I also see the intense amount of strength and resilience that it takes to do some of the things that she did. And yes, there's mistakes in there, but it's also like, as a man in this world, I kind of would like to account for some of the traumas and violences that she went through. Because if I don't, I think it's just me telling an easier story. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You don't villainize her in the memoir, and we get all of her complication and contradiction. But I think there's also like this wonderful, amazing scene that's also, yeah, I'm going to stay with it as wonderful and amazing, of your aunt's visit to you in Paris. That's just kind of a counter to, another black woman in your life. I never figure out in the memoir if Nadia's mom is black, but
She is, yeah.
okay. So there's this other black women
Yeah,
who
yeah.
constitute family, who were not as harsh in their judgment of you, and the scenes that you write with your aunt in Paris and her joy at you, and Enzo, is quite fantastic. You want to say anything about?
Yeah. I mean, that section was really fun to write. Just because, I mean, as someone that experienced it, like, I mean, I kind of wrote towards it in the book, but it was so beautiful to have this aunt visit, and I was so fearful, like, is she gonna freak out when I come out to her? And I kind of knew she wouldn't, but you also got to prepare yourself. And so I experienced such a beautiful thing, and then near the end of the chapter, she's like, you don't know enough about your father's death, and there's all these things you don't know. And so, what I'm kind of trying to situate in that chapter is how do you experience something beautiful, and then that beauty leads into something completely tragic and heartbreaking and disturbing? And how do you place those two things in the same place? How do you have those live alongside each other? But I mean, I think to your question, in writing about my aunt and these other black women in the book, I just kind of really wanted to appreciate the moments of joy that I could have with the black women in my family in the ways that it related to the themes that I was exploring. And I mean, I look back at that chapter with my aunt in Paris differently because there's been other things that she's done since then where I'm like, it's not the same. And so some of it has changed for me, but I think, yeah, I think it's just like sometimes you experience things with people and it's something you've hungered for so much that even in the moment you know that like this is a gift that I'm experiencing now that I can stow away and look back on when I'm tired or things are difficult or I'm sad, and I can appreciate that for what it was then, even if things are going to change. And so I really wanted to write from that place and honor it. And yeah, I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, reading your writing about your mother, your aunt, Nadia, really made it called to mind for me Hilton Als, the women, and the kind of complicated relationship that he also had with the women in his life as a younger gay man coming into himself. And I think, sometimes, the narrative of Jamaican, of Caribbean people as being more homophobic than other people can sometimes have people read our parents, our sisters, our aunts, our mothers, in totally uncharitable ways. And I think what you gave us in the memoir is not that, but rather the intimacy of that complication and what it does to you, any of us who are black and queer when we are greeted by that. And of course, we all don't have that same experience, but yeah.